Romy Schneider was born into admiration. Before she learned how to protect herself, the world had already decided to love her. Her smile was radiant, effortless, almost disarming, the kind that suggested warmth, innocence, and certainty. To audiences, she felt safe. To cinema, she felt inevitable. But smiles can lie, especially the ones that appear too early. From a young age, Romy carried expectations that were never hers to choose. She was shaped into an icon of purity, a symbol of idealized femininity that left no room for complexity, pain, or contradiction. The world adored her image and quietly ignored the woman struggling to breathe behind it. Fame did not arrive as discovery. It arrived as inheritance. Her success was framed as destiny, but destiny is a heavy burden when it denies choice. Romy learned quickly that the admiration surrounding her was conditional. She was celebrated only as long as she remained who others needed her to be. Any deviation felt like betrayal. Inside, she felt restless, confined, misunderstood. The roles that made her famous also trapped her. Innocence became obligation. Beauty became expectation. And the more the world insisted she remain untouched by darkness, the more alone she felt carrying it. Romy did not seek rebellion. She sought truth. And that desire to be seen honestly, to live fully rather than symbolically, would cost her everything she had been promised. Because in cinema, women are often allowed to be adored or destroyed, but rarely understood. This is not the story of a fallen star. It is the story of a woman slowly eroded by grief, loss, and the impossible demand to smile through all of it. Romy Schneider's tragedy did not begin with scandal. It began with love, the kind that asked for nothing in return except silence. Romy Schneider did not leave success behind because she despised it. She left because success, as it was offered to her, did not allow her to breathe. In Germany and Austria, she had become a national treasure almost overnight. The Sisi films crowned her as an emblem of innocence and grace, a young woman frozen in a fairy tale image the public refused to let mature. Audiences adored her, studios protected the myth, and Romy, still barely an adult, felt herself disappearing inside a role that would not release her. Admiration turned into confinement. Every script repeated the same promise: safety, purity, nostalgia. Every interview reinforced the same expectation: remain untouched, remain grateful, remain the girl the country loved. Romy sensed that if she stayed, she would never grow. Not as an actress, not as a woman. The smile that had brought her everything was becoming a mask she could no longer remove. So she chose exile. Moving to France was not a rejection of her past. It was an attempt to reclaim a future. In Paris, she encountered a cinema that welcomed contradiction, one that allowed women to be complex, wounded, sexual, uncertain. Directors asked her to unlearn perfection, to bring her unease to the surface rather than hide it. For the first time, vulnerability was not a liability. But exile is never painless. Back home, she was judged harshly. The public felt betrayed. Headlines framed her departure as arrogance, ingratitude, even moral failure. The affection that once lifted her now turned cold, proving how conditional it had always been. Romy carried that wound with her, a quiet guilt that never fully healed. In France, work challenged her deeply. Roles demanded exposure. Emotions were not softened. Pain was not disguised. She excelled and suffered. Reinvention offered artistic freedom, but it also stripped away the protections of familiarity. Without the fairy tale shield, Romy faced the world raw, unguarded. Praise returned, but it felt different now. Earned, not inherited. And yet, beneath the acclaim, uncertainty lingered. She was admired for her courage, but no longer held by unconditional love. Self-exile saved her artistry. It did not save her from loneliness. Because when you leave a country that loved your image more than your truth, you carry that loss wherever you go. A quiet understanding that belonging, once broken, may never fully return. Romy Schneider loved intensely, almost recklessly. For her, love was not refuge. It was immersion. She gave herself fully, believing that intimacy might offer the grounding fame never could. But love, like applause, proved fragile when placed under constant observation. Her relationship with Alain Delon became legend. beautiful, passionate, unstable. Together, they embodied a new kind of European glamour. Magnetic, modern, impossible to ignore. Cameras followed them relentlessly, turning private moments into public property. What began as devotion slowly became pressure. The intensity that drew them together also pulled them apart, amplified by careers moving in different directions and expectations neither could satisfy. When the relationship ended, it did not simply break Romy's heart, it fractured her sense of safety. She felt abandoned not only by a man she loved, but by the idea that love could protect her from loneliness. The loss cut deeply, leaving behind a vulnerability that would resurface again and again. Motherhood offered temporary anchoring, a reason to stay present, a reason to hope. But even joy arrived cautiously. Romy carried fear alongside love, aware that happiness had never lasted long in her life. She was tender with her children, fiercely protective, determined to offer them the stability she had never known. And yet the demands of her career pulled her away, feeding guilt she could never fully silence. Tragedy soon followed. Loss entered her life not as a single event, but as a pattern. Relationships dissolving, trust eroding, moments of happiness shadowed by dread. Each wound reopened earlier ones, reinforcing the belief that attachment inevitably led to pain. Professionally, she continued to thrive. Her performances grew deeper, darker, more fearless. Directors praised her honesty. Audiences sensed her truth. But privately, Romy began to withdraw. Grief did not announce itself loudly. It settled in quietly, altering how she moved through the world. She became more guarded, more suspicious of joy, more exhausted by connection. Love had promised salvation. Instead, it taught her impermanence. And with each loss, something hardened inside Romy Schneider. Not bitterness, but a weary understanding that the smile the world adored had never been a shield. It was simply the surface of a woman learning again and again how deeply life could wound. Tragedy did not arrive suddenly in Romy Schneider's life. It crept in, quietly at first, then all at once. The death of her son shattered what little sense of balance she had managed to preserve. No role, no applause, no love affair could prepare her for that loss. Grief did not come as waves. It arrived as collapse. Time fractured. Memory became unbearable. The future felt unthinkable. Guilt followed immediately, relentless, unforgiving. Romy questioned every decision she had ever made, every absence, every compromise between career and motherhood. She replayed moments endlessly, searching for a version of herself that could have prevented the irreversible. The mind, already trained to punish itself, found no mercy. Publicly, she was expected to endure. Privately, she barely survived. Work became both refuge and torment. On set, she could momentarily step into another life, another pain, one that followed a script and eventually ended. Off set, there was no structure. Nights stretched endlessly. Sleep became fragile. Alcohol and medication entered her life not as indulgence, but as anesthesia. Friends watched her fade. She grew thinner, quieter, more withdrawn. The laughter that once filled rooms now appeared only briefly, like a memory replayed for others' comfort. People spoke of her strength, but strength was never what she felt. Survival felt mechanical, automatic. Something she did because stopping would have required too much explanation. The weight of grief reshaped her entirely. Joy felt dangerous. Hope felt naive. She lived with the constant fear that any moment of happiness would be punished, as it had been before. Loss had trained her to expect catastrophe, to distrust calm. And yet she continued, not because she believed in recovery, but because endurance had become habit. Romy Schneider did not choose resilience. It was imposed upon her. The world admired her for carrying on, never asking what it cost to remain standing. Tragedy did not end her life. It hollowed it. What remained was a woman moving through days under the weight of unbearable survival, alive, visible, admired, and profoundly broken in ways no audience could ever fully see. After the tragedy, Romy Schneider's life narrowed to essentials, and even those felt heavy. Invitations slowed, friendships thinned. The world did not abandon her outright. It simply grew quieter, as though unsure how to speak to a woman whose grief could not be softened or resolved. She learned to move through days with caution, conserving energy for moments that mattered, though fewer and fewer did. Her body bore the marks of exhaustion. Her face, once radiant, now carried fatigue that no lighting could hide. Illness lingered, fed by stress and sleepless nights. Work returned in fragments. Directors who truly understood her offered roles that asked for nothing but honesty. On screen, she was devastating, stripped of artifice, luminous in pain. Critics recognized the depth. Audiences felt it. Yet every performance extracted something she could not afford to lose. The applause ended. The weight remained. Isolation became routine. She withdrew from social life, wary of pity and tired of explanations. Conversations felt fragile. Silence felt safer. Alcohol and medication were not excesses. They were tools, and imperfect ones, to quiet a mind that replayed loss without mercy. The past pressed in, the future offered little promise, and the present demanded endurance she barely possessed. There were moments of clarity, brief mornings of resolve, short plans made carefully, as if hope itself required permission. But these moments dissolve quickly. Grief does not move in a straight line. It circles, returns, sharpens. Romy understood this too well. She carried her sorrow with dignity, refusing spectacle, refusing confession. The world admired her discretion without grasping the cost. In her final days, there was no grand farewell, no staged redemption, no public reckoning. She died quietly, leaving behind questions that felt inappropriate to ask and answers no one expected to receive. The headlines were respectful, the tributes were sincere, and still something essential was missing: acknowledgement of how alone she had been. Romy Schneider did not fade because she lacked strength. She faded because grief had consumed every reserve she had. Her quiet end was not defeat. It was exhaustion finally allowed to rest. Romy Schneider will always be remembered for her smile, radiant, gentle, reassuring. A smile that seemed to promise warmth in a world that desperately wanted to believe in it. But that smile was never protection. It was concealment. Behind it lived a woman who carried grief long before the world noticed. Grief for a childhood shaped by expectation, for love that could not last, for losses that arrived without mercy. Romy was not destroyed by a single tragedy, but by accumulation. Each wound layered upon the last, until endurance itself became a burden. The cinema admired her courage. The public admired her discretion. Few asked how much silence costs when it is practiced for a lifetime. Romy Schneider gave performances that felt painfully honest because they were drawn from experience rather than imagination. She did not act sorrow. She translated it. And in doing so, she became one of the most emotionally truthful actresses of her generation. Her brilliance was not born from strength alone, but from survival shaped by loss. What makes her story so haunting is not its sadness, but its familiarity. How often do we praise resilience without offering care? How often do we celebrate composure while ignoring the pain it hides? Romy lived in a world that admired her ability to carry grief beautifully, never questioning why she had to carry it alone. She was not fragile. She was exhausted. And exhaustion, when misunderstood, looks like fading. Romy Schneider did not lose her life to weakness. She lost it to a lifetime of sorrow, absorbed quietly, politely, without complaint. Her end was not dramatic because her struggle had already consumed everything dramatic within her. Today, her legacy remains, not only in film but in warning, a reminder that behind every iconic image may live a person fighting battles that admiration cannot heal. The smile the world loved was real. So was the grief it hid. And in remembering Romy Schneider honestly, we are called not just to admire her, but to reflect on how easily beauty and talent are praised while suffering is left to endure in silence.